All right.
Good evening. My name is Mike Robbins. I am a very mild alcoholic. Almost not alcoholic at all, really. I do usually use my last name. It's not flaunting tradition. It's just that there are a lot of Mikes out there, and I don't want to be confused with any of them. Happy Halloween, by the way. I was speaking last year on Halloween, and I was very surprised that anybody showed up. I was surprised how many people were there. And to be in a place like this, it's a real contrast for me. Because 48 hours ago, I was looking out at the world from inside one of Alabama's state penitentiaries. And today I'm looking at the world through windows like we have over there. And in my opinion, this is much better. I do live in Montgomery, Alabama. I'm a transplanted Southerner, which means I've kind of taken on the Southern aspect as if it were my own. And the only reason that's important is we were here last night for the little meeting that they had there. And, you know, I live in the South, but I had to fly a long way south to get here. And I heard an awful lot of foreign accents last night. Yankee accents. And it took me a little while to understand what they were saying. The folks who live north, they can talk faster than I can listen. Especially those folks from New York City. Ever listen to them? I'm still trying to catch up to the last one who talked to me. I'm a physician, by the way. I'm a doctor. I do internal medicine, and I am the medical director of one of the larger state penitentiaries in Alabama. And the only thing really I'll say about that is, please don't drink and drive in that state. If none of the other consequences bother you much, then just envision me headed your way with a rubber glove in this hand and a tube of KY jelly in that hand. I don't think that would be much fun for either one of us. Unlike a lot of people, I didn't come to AA because I had a drinking problem. I came to AA because of a series of unfortunate misunderstandings. It was, I don't know, it's just one of those things. But I knew, you know, I hear people in the rooms today and they say, you know, I knew I was an alcoholic well before I came into the program. I knew I was not an alcoholic well after I came into the program. Because I'd had experience with alcoholics. I knew what alcoholics were like. It's a fact that roughly 7 out of 10 of every hospital admission is related either directly or indirectly to alcohol. And so from the very beginning of my training, I worked with alcoholics. And I knew that there were certain characteristics of all alcoholics. One was that they were noisy. Well, they weren't noisy at first, because usually alcoholics come in comatose, and unconscious people don't make a lot of noise. But the first thing that they usually do when they wake up, is want to leave against medical advice. They want to leave AMA. Got to get me out of here, doc. They were also ungrateful. I mean, you'd spend days and weeks and sometimes months trying to patch them up. And, you know, they would say, when are you going to let me go, doc? They were messy. They threw up a lot. I stopped wearing good shoes in the hospital. And alcoholics were not particularly bright either, because, you know, they'd come in with these horrendous complications that were clearly related to alcohol. And you'd spend all of this time and get them patched up, and just before you'd send them home, you would sit down and say, now look, this won't happen to you again if you don't drink. And they would say, gotcha, doc. And so you'd discharge them, and you couldn't even get down to the cafeteria before your beeper would go off and they're back in the emergency room, twice as bad as they were just before you sent them, you know, they came in the last time. So, you know, alcoholics are dumb. I wasn't dumb, and I wasn't noisy. I hadn't thrown up on anybody's shoes but my own. I mean, it was just very clear that I was not an alcoholic. And I don't know about you, but, you know, sitting in for a non-alcoholic, sitting in an AA meeting is a strange experience. It's uncomfortable, and you look around and you go, oh my God, why are they doing those things? So I was a non-alcoholic in Alcoholics Anonymous for quite some time. And, of course, time went by. I want to read you something here. I'm going to read you a couple excerpts from an official document, okay? This is an official document, public action by a government agency. It concerns a physician who shall remain nameless. We'll call him Dr. X. Okay. Let's see. On March 16th, Dr. X's wife notified his AA sponsor, Mr. Max M., that Dr. X was drunk. That sponsor and Dr. Y came to the home of Dr. X and attempted to arouse him. Initially, they could not arouse him. Mrs. X indicated that earlier Dr. X had acted belligerent. She expressed concern for Dr. X as he was behaving differently than he normally behaves. When Dr. X was finally roused, he did not deny getting drunk or acting differently. He just went back to bed. Then it goes on a little bit later. Both Dr. A and Dr. F expressed concern about the risk of Dr. X committing suicide. Then it goes down to say that the Board of Medical Examiners hereby requests that the Medical Licensure Commission suspend immediately the license of Dr. X because it appears that he constitutes a danger to his patients and to the public. It goes on to say, A, engaged in immoral, unprofessional, and dishonorable conduct as defined in blah, blah, blah. B, prescribed, dispensed, furnished, and or supplied a controlled substance to himself for self-administration for reasons other than a legitimate medical purpose. And then it goes on to say that Dr. X is unable to practice medicine with reasonable skill and safety to patients by reason of illness or excessive use of alcohol and or other controlled substances and or other drugs. And in big capital letters it says, Dr. X is hereby ordered and directed to surrender the license to practice medicine in the state of Alabama. Dr. X is hereby ordered to immediately cease and desist. Well, I don't know what your opinion is, but it seemed to me that old Dr. X was having a bad day. And so what did they decide to do? They decided they were going to bundle up Dr. X and cart him off to treatment. And through a horrible case of mistaken identity, they sent me instead. I was not happy. Now you need to understand some things. This is not the first time that I got carted off to treatment. In fact, this was the 5th time in the approximately 20 years since the very first time I was exposed to recovery that I had gone to long-term residential treatment. Not your sissy 14 or 28-day programs. We're talking like months. And the reason for that is that there is this strange idea out there among the folks who do treatment that doctors have control issues. The doctors have a hard time taking orders. And the doctors often confuse themselves with God. They use such terms as M-deity. I had been in AA for roughly 20 years at this point. During that 20 years, I drank perhaps about a year total during those 20 years. But at no time could I ever claim to have been sober. I went to AA. I did what they asked me to do. I went to thousands of meetings. I read the big book and the other literature. I got involved with service work. I got a sponsor. I even tried to sponsor other people. And somehow I simply couldn't make it work. I would come out of treatment all pumped up, fired up, ready to go, dive into recovery, and participate enthusiastically to the best of my ability. And what would happen would be like a very small hole in an inner tube. Somehow, as time went by, the air leaked out, almost imperceptibly. And I knew it was happening every time. And I'd go to more meetings, and I'd talk to my sponsor, and I'd talk about it in groups. And the tire just kept getting flatter and flatter until my life consisted of getting up, going to work, going to meetings, going to bed, getting up, going to work, going to meetings, going to bed. And eventually, I never relapsed by accident, not even once. But eventually, the idea that I might get even a few minutes of relief from the way that sobriety felt to me was worth it. And I knew I wouldn't be able to stop. And I knew the consequences would come in bucket loads. And I didn't care. And I wasn't a very good drinker. I wasn't very successful. And it would be just a matter of days, weeks, occasionally months before I would be back in that pit of consequences. And the worst of it was that I pulled in every single person who cared anything about me in with me. And I did that over and over and over again. And I knew what I was missing. I knew what wasn't working for me. And it was that thing that Bill Wilson called the spiritual angle. I knew I didn't get that. Anytime this idea of spiritual things came up in meetings, I got lost. I understood the words, but nothing seemed to happen to me. I'm going to tell you a joke that might illustrate a little bit about how I felt in AA. And what I want you to do is just kind of take stock of how you're feeling right now. Bored, sleepy, full, whatever, happy to be in St. Thomas, however you're feeling. Just kind of take quick stock of how you're feeling right now. Then I'm going to tell you the joke, and I want you to compare the two. Okay? I'll even tell you what the joke is about. The joke is about a drunken termite. Okay? So, pay attention. Here comes the joke. A drunken termite wandered down the road, threw open the doors of the local saloon, walked up, pounded his fist on the table, and yells, "Where's the bartender?" How do you feel right now? Because the joke is over. Seriously, how do you feel? You feel like, "Ooh, shit, I just missed something." Do you feel maybe just a little bit stupid because there was a couple of people who did laugh? Do you feel a little bit hostile toward the person who told the joke? Made you feel a little bit stupid. How do you feel right now? That's how I felt in AA. Oh, let me explain the joke. Remember, the joke's about a termite. Termites eat wood. He went in asking where was the slab of wood that they set the drinks on, tender and tasty to eat. Where is the bar tender? Oh, now it's funny. And it's funny because now you have the perspective of a termite. People were talking about spiritual things. They're talking about prayer. They're talking about God. They're talking about love and honesty. And I wasn't a termite. I heard the words, but I missed the joke. And the God thing. Oh, well, you know, I didn't come from a religious family. I didn't have any religious training as a child. My family didn't care about religion one way or the other. They went for it. They weren't against it. We didn't talk about banana prices in Brazil at the dinner table, and we didn't talk about God. We didn't care about either one. Okay? In fact, one time when I was small, I asked my father, I said, "Dad, how come we don't go to church like my friends?" And what he said was, "Well, son, for those who need it, religion is fine, but you see, it's kind of like a crutch." And there was no way that anybody was ever going to see me as a cripple. That just was not going to happen. And so when I come into AA, I got real problems. And what they told me, I'm going to tell you another joke, and this one's a little easier to understand. Okay? Let's say I'm walking down the street minding my own business, and around the corner comes a Mustang, and I can't get out of the way in time, and it clips me, and over the hood I go, and into the gutter I go, and oh man, I'm hurt. I'm hurt bad. I got things crunching in my bones, and I got this, I can't get up, and my legs don't seem to be working right, and I got this little thing in my chest, and it's kind of blowing this geyser of blood, and I can't help myself, and I'm dying. And along comes the ambulance, and they scoop me up, and they take me over to the emergency room, and they wheel me into the trauma room. And I'm sitting there, and they're putting in the wires and putting on the EKGs and putting in the IV poles, and they're running around in all kinds of places. And this little geyser of blood is still going out of my chest, and I'm dying because I can't help myself. And in comes the trauma surgeon. And he looks confident. He looks assured. He's a man who knows his business, and he's going to save me. And he comes over, and he whispers in my ear, "Mike, I can help you. But first, you need to believe with all your heart in the Easter Bunny." That's what I heard. My life's a wreck. Things are inflamed. I'm dying. I can't hurt myself. I can't help myself. And I come into AA, and they tell me, "Mike, your answer is there with the Easter Bunny." That's what I heard. And that's the part of this program I couldn't do. And so there I am in my 5th treatment center. And I've already been to the best of these places. I've been to all the groups. I know what's going to be said. I know somebody's going to say this, and a little bit later something over there, and then there's going to be an emotional breakthrough and a little bit of tears, and everybody will go, "Oh, he's had a breakthrough now," and then they'll stop picking on me, and then I'll finish up treatment, and I'll come out all charged up, and the air will slowly but surely leak out of my tire, and I'll do the same thing over and over again. I know I can't drink. But the program that's designed to save my life, I can't do. How hopeless do you need to be? And so I'm there, and I know I'm wasting my time. There's very little that I haven't heard in AA. Very little I haven't heard in treatment. And I'm just wasting my time. And then one day, it was probably about 5 days after I was there, one of the counselors, who's a little bit more attuned to AA than most of the folks in treatment centers are, he gets up and he reads a line that I'd never heard before. And he claimed that it came from the 12 and 12. And what he read was, AA's 12 steps are a group of principles, spiritual in their nature, which, if practiced as a way of life, can expel the obsession to drink and enable the sufferer to become happily and usefully whole. Now, I had one immediate thought, which was, that ain't in the 12 and 12. I've read the 12 and 12 100 times. That is not in the 12 and 12. And he goes, oh yeah it is. And I said, oh no it ain't. And it was. But it was in the foreword, which nobody reads. So I was right. It wasn't really in the 12 and 12. But I'd never heard it before. I had never heard that line before. And the other thing it did, for some reason, it said the 12 steps are a group of principles. Now, I'd been in AA for quite a while, and I'd heard the word principles thrown around here and there, but this was the first time I started thinking, are the steps the same thing as the principles? And if they're not, how are they different? AA's 12 steps are a group of principles. What does that mean? And you see what they did for me? I had been trying to do this thing for almost 20 years. Heard it all, seen it all, over and over. I'm here in a treatment center with no hope because I've already tried that. And they've got me thinking something besides, oh, I would very much like to die now. Well, after I'd been there for about a month or so, I started feeling physically some better. I mean, my life was still a mess. So I went to the guy who ran the treatment center and I said, you've lied to me. And he said, now what? And I said, you said it was going to get better. And it hasn't gotten better. I've been here for about a month. I'm just getting going. My wife still hates me. My kids still hate me. I still can't go home. I still don't have a medical license. I'm never going to have a medical license. I got these horrible money problems. Everything is down the tubes. That's no different than it was when I first came here. Nothing has gotten better. And he looked at me and he said, well, tell me something. When's the last time that things got worse for you? Oh. I had to think about that. And I had to admit, things really hadn't gotten any worse since the first day I'd gotten there. Now, they hadn't gotten any better, but they hadn't gotten worse. And he said, when was the last time things stopped getting worse for you? Now, that was interesting. And he said, isn't going backwards a big step forwards? And that was interesting too. And he said, what have you been doing here since you've been here? And I said, I haven't really done much of anything. He said, no, you have been doing some things. So I said, well, I've been telling the truth, which is that I don't think that I can ever recover. I think that this treatment center is full of crap, and I don't think the counselors know what they're doing, and I can't do this spirituality thing, and AA sucks. And he said, so you've been telling the truth? And I said, yes. The truth as I see it. So you've been honest? And I said, yeah. And he said, isn't it interesting that as a tool, honesty can arrest a situation? If you're honest in the middle of a situation that's going downhill, he said, many, many times it's not going to make it better, but it will immediately stop it from getting worse. And he said, isn't it even more interesting that honesty is the principle of the first step? Admitted that I was powerless over alcohol, that that's just the way it is. And that was a brand new idea. The idea that perhaps the steps, besides being tasks, might actually be designed to teach me a skill that I needed to learn how to do, a tool that would help me deal with my problems. Honesty helped me by stopping the process of my life spiraling downward. Honesty as a tool. I'd never thought of it that way before. And remember that I'm about 30 days out now, so I'm not quite as toxic as I was. And I started remembering. I had gone to a bookstore, an old used bookstore in Atlanta, Georgia, a few years before. And down at the bottom of some steps in a dusty old corner, I had found a second edition Big Book. Now, it was all crummy and beat up. It was still way more expensive than I could afford. But still, I was looking through it, and somebody had penciled in next to each step in how it works a word. And I remembered that the word that was penciled in next to the first step was honesty. Now, I don't know when this was penciled in, but that second edition Big Book was published in 1942. Penciled in next to the next word, next step, next to step 2 was hope. And then next to the next one was faith. Then there was courage, integrity, willingness, humility, love, discipline, perseverance, awareness, and the last one, 12, was service. And I started thinking, maybe I could look at the steps as being designed to teach me how to do one of those things. I wonder if it works that way. And so I looked at step 3 and step 2, the hope and the faith. Now, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. If in the first step I say that I'm screwed, which is that when I'm drinking I cannot stop, and when I'm not drinking I'm thinking about drinking, and I have a hopeless condition, and that is pretty powerless, there's no way out. The second step says, but there still might be. That's hope. It hasn't happened to me, but the possibility was there. And I thought that was real interesting. How could that be looked at as a tool? Well, I sat down with another person who had been through this already. And what he did was help me a little bit by defining hope and faith for me. Because I had always kind of wondered, those 3 words, belief and hope and faith, they seem to be interchangeable. I would ask people, well, what does it mean if I believe? And it says, it means you got faith. And I'd say, well, what does it mean if I got faith? It says, you believe. Now, I know circular logic when I hear it. And I wasn't going anywhere. I was not a termite. I did not understand the terms. And what the guy said was it was a process of one to the next to the next. He said belief was simply, if you say that you did something and got a result from having done it, and I don't think you're a pathological liar, I believe you. Okay, fine. You did something, you got the result, great. I'm not involved, but I believe that you believe at least that you did that. If you say that in such a way that I start thinking, maybe I can do that too. If I'm sitting in some place and there's a guy across the room and he says, today I got up in the morning and I said a tiny little trivial prayer and I read a line out of a particular book and I talked to another recovering person and I made it to a meeting and I managed to stay sober for that whole day, I believe you. And if you say it in such a way that I'm thinking, well, that doesn't sound so hard, maybe I can't do the prayer thing, maybe I'm not going to read a line out of that stupid book, but at least maybe I can get to a meeting. I'm starting to think, well, maybe I can do that too. And what's happened there, is I've created something that wasn't there before. I've actually created hope. And as a tool, I can create hope anytime I want to. All I need to do is find somebody who's already been through something that I'm trying to go through and ask them, how did you do it? And if they can tell me in such a way that I can think, well, maybe I can do that too, then I have created hope. Hope as a tool? Now that's really interesting to me. I had never heard that before. Hope, it seemed, was you either had it or you didn't. But now they're telling me that I can actually create it. The next step is if I actually do what you say you did. If I get up in the morning and I say a quick little prayer and I read a line out of a book and I talk to another recovering person and I go to a meeting and I manage to stay sober myself and I experience that for myself and then I do it again and I get the same result and then I do it again and I get the same result, eventually I'm going to know for a fact that if I do it one more time I'll get the same result. And that's pretty rock solid faith, isn't it? If I already know what the outcome is going to be before I do the action, that's pretty rock solid faith. And I thought, that's so cool. I can do that. I can create hope. I can build hope by simply going around trying to find someone else or other people who have already done what I'm trying to do and ask them, how did you do it? And try to get them to do it in such a way that it doesn't sound impossible to me. That's creating and strengthening hope. And then if I do what they say they did and I experience the result and I do it again and I do it again, I've created and strengthened faith. Even Easter Bunny me can do that. Oh, that idea was so interesting to me. I'd never looked at the steps or recovery from that point of view before. That was new. In 20 years of trying this, that was new. And it opened up the possibility that even I might be able to do something like answer the question, do you have faith, Mike? Well, I don't know if there's a God or not and all that kind of stuff, but if I've done the same thing today that I did yesterday and it worked for me and I plan on doing it tomorrow, I can say, yes, I have faith, thank you very much. I like that idea. And then the next thing they said to me, they said maybe one of the definitions of spirituality might be that a spiritual thing is something that changes how I feel. And they said, for example, if I do an honest thing, given a certain situation, or not the honest thing, I feel differently. If somebody comes up and says, Mike, is that your $10 bill that we found on the pavement out there and it's not mine? And I say, no, it's not mine, I feel one way. If I say, yes, it is mine, I feel another way entirely. So being honest does change how I feel. One way makes me feel a little more comfortable than the other way. Is being honest a spiritual thing? Oh, please tell me that that's true. Because now, if that's true, I can do spiritual stuff. Having hope or not having hope changes how I feel. Having faith or not having faith, not knowing what I'm going to do tomorrow, not knowing if it's going to work or not, or knowing that it will work, changes how I feel. Is faith a spiritual thing? It changes how I feel. And I said, well, that seems to work out pretty well for the first 3 steps. Show me the rest of it. I said, this is good stuff. I like this. And then they came to the 4th step, and they said, Mike, the principle of the 4th step's courage. And I could kind of see where the fear came from. The only people... Well, let me just back up. One of the things that used to terrify me when I was a kid in school, more than anything else, was the idea that the teacher would hand out a test where the instructions were not clear. Oh, no, lived in fear of that. God Almighty. Well, let me tell you, the only people that I know of who say that the instructions on the 4th step are clear are the people who have already done a 4th step. Not to mention the stuff that you got to poke around in when you're doing your 4th step. Not to mention the idea that probably peeked ahead a little bit and you're going to have to tell another person this stuff that you're putting down on your 4th step. The idea that I may or may not do the 4th step correctly. There's an awful lot of things that engender fear as a part of the 4th step. And I understood fear. Fear had dominated my life. Fear had dominated my life. But consider that if I manage to complete the 4th step anyway, get that stuff on paper to the point where the sponsor says, yeah, you've probably done enough, let's go on to 5, then I've done something. I have transformed the fear into something else called courage. Now, fear, I'm ashamed of. I don't like going into groups, even today, saying, oh, I've been so afraid today. But if courage as a tool, if I can learn how to transform fear into courage, and the 4th step tells me how to do that, it says, do the next right thing anyway. And then you can take credit for courage, even though it still feels like fear. How interesting is that? I like that. So I can still feel afraid, which I'm ashamed of, but I can go in there and claim credit for courage because I did the next right thing anyway, and I don't mind doing that. It changes how I feel. I have actually met a number of people who have gotten medals for valor, for bravery, for courageous acts for our country. And you go up there and ask them, how did you feel when the stuff was actually happening? And they all said, I was very, very afraid. And yet they get the medals for being courageous. And why? Only because they managed to do the next right thing in the face of fear. That's a tool. That's a skill that the 4th step teaches me how to do. Another one. A step teaches me how to do a skill that I can apply to other things in my life. What a wonderful idea that was to me. And then step 5, integrity, telling the truth about myself into the ears of another person. Well, that clearly could be pretty useful. Like, think relationships. How interesting. So now we're 5 out of 5. And then we come to step 6. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. I really wanted to do this properly now. I had screwed it up for 20 years, and I'm on a roll. I got through 5, and that all makes sense to me. I had real problems with 6, I got to tell you, and mainly it centered around the word entirely. Because, well, let's say I had a tumor in my lung, and they said, you know, it's there, it's not spread anywhere, all we need to do is do some surgery and it'll be gone and you'll be cured and you'll be fine. Now, I may agree that that's a good idea, but am I going to be entirely ready to have the surgery? Well, it might hurt. I don't know these doctors. They might make a mistake. Maybe the tumor isn't just there. Maybe it's spread. They just don't see it on the tests. Maybe when they do the surgery, I'll have post-operative complications. I'll have an infection and end up being worse off than I was before. So although I can intellectually agree that having this surgery to remove this tumor in my lung is probably a good idea, am I entirely ready to have it done? Entirely ready to have it done? Oh, we think not. And there's another aspect of it. Somewhat related, but it's a little different. I want to tell you another story. Let's say I have a yard, and I'm real proud of my yard. I like my yard. I spend a lot of time out there. I trim it up nice. I fertilize it. I'm real proud of how it looks and works and all this kind of stuff. And I'm just loving my yard to death. And I'm out there in the morning, and I'm looking at my nice yard, and next door neighbor's got a big dog, and the big dog gets out, comes over right in front of me, squats down, and takes this enormous doggy dump right in my yard. Well, I'm not happy. I don't like the way it looks. I don't like the way it smells. I don't want that big pile of doggy dump in the middle of my nice yard. I don't like the pile. I don't like the dog who made the pile. I don't like the son of a bitch who owns the dog. I don't like the woman who married the son of a bitch who owns the dog. I'm pissed. I want that pile gone. I want it out of my yard, and I want it out of my yard now. Now, I've got another neighbor who lives on the other side, and he's noticing the commotion. He comes up there and he says, Mike, I can't help but admire that monument in the middle of your yard. Is that I've got a garden. I can use that for fertilizer. Why don't you give it to me? And you know what I do? I go, I'm sorry, that's mine. I have no idea why I do that. So to be entirely ready to have something removed that I don't want in the first place, no way. So how am I going to learn about this willingness business? And what they did is they changed my life with a piece of paper. And what they said was, took a piece of paper, made a little alteration to the piece of paper, and they held up the piece of paper, and to those of you who might be listening to this CD, what I did was tear a hole in the middle of the piece of paper. They held it up, and they said, Mike, where is the defect? And I said, oh my God, it's right there. And they said, Mike, what makes that a defect? Is that a defect because there's something bad there that needs to be removed? Or is that a defect because there's something that's supposed to be there that's not? New idea. Maybe a defect is not something bad that needs to be surgically removed. Maybe a defect is something I don't have enough of and need some more. Maybe my defect is not that I'm a liar. Maybe my defect is that I just don't have enough honesty. Maybe my defect is not that I'm hopeless. Maybe my defect is that I just don't have quite enough hope. Maybe my defect is not that I'm fear-ridden. Maybe my defect is that I don't have enough courage. Maybe what the sixth step was asking me was whether or not I was entirely willing to be given more than what I had. We're entirely ready to have the holes filled in and the defect thereby removed. And looking at it that way, all of a sudden I could be entirely willing to be given more. Hell, I've been asking for more my whole life. I didn't have to learn anything new. Please give me more honesty. Please give me more hope. Please give me more faith. Please give me more courage. Please give me more integrity. Please give me more intimacy in my relationships. Please give me more. Help me fill in the holes and thereby remove the defects. And what I learned that as a tool, willingness is almost always a function of finding a different way of looking at the problem. I could not be entirely willing to have something bad surgically removed, but I could become entirely willing to be given more of something I didn't have enough of. And all I needed to do was change my point of view. And whether I'm willing or not changes how I feel. Willingness seems to be a spiritual principle. And here I am able to do a spiritual thing for the first time in my recovery that I knew of. 7 was humility, a clear recognition of who and what I really am, followed by a sincere attempt to become all I could be. Where are the defects? What things do I need more of? And then asking for it. And I could do that. Please, God, give me more. I don't have any trouble doing that. 8 was about love. Making a list of all persons we had harmed. I could sort of understand that. There's 2 groups of people that I needed to make amends to. At least I was told. The first group of folks who were those who I really cared about. People that I loved or liked or were in my life, and I really wanted to repair those relationships with them. I wanted to make things right, and I did love them. And I could see where love as a principle applied to that group of people. The problem was there was a much larger group, a second group, who deserved what I did to them, and given the chance, I would do it to them again. I really didn't love them. And I really didn't see how the principle of love would apply to them. And what they asked me was a question. They said, "How much do you love yourself, Mike? How much is it worth to you to get those people out of your head?" How much is it worth to you to know that to the best of your ability you have done the best thing possible to square the books? How much do you love yourself? And that put a whole new spin on the whole idea of, do I love myself? And they gave me a wonderful definition of love. Something very practical that I was able to measure whether or not I loved you or whether I didn't. And they told me, Mike, you love somebody if you're willing to wash their dirty socks. Now, that's not particularly romantic, but it was actually very useful. It told me almost instantly the difference between love and lust. I mean, the pretty thing bouncing down there, well, I'm in, am I willing to wash your dirty sock? No. I have other things in mind. But at least there's no confusion. I don't get along with my parents. I don't like my parents. But I am willing to wash their dirty socks. If it came down to it and they really needed me to be there, I would be there. I haven't spoken to them or see them for quite a number of years. But the fact is, I would be there. And that idea taught me that I could love somebody and not like them. And that was interesting. And then this idea of forgiveness. If I don't love you, do I love myself enough to do the forgiveness thing? And they gave me a wonderful definition of forgiveness on how to start. For example, there's plenty of times they say, well, you need to forgive that person. And I'm thinking, okay, how? Tell me how. How do I know if I've forgiven that person or not? They said, Mike, you need to forgive yourself. Fine. What do I do? It's great words, wonderful words, termite words, but I don't have a clue what you're talking about. And they said, Mike, to forgive someone simply means you stop trying to get even. I like that one. And that's all I had to do. And it also meant that I could forgive somebody, and it didn't mean I had to like them. All I needed to do is just stop doing whatever I was doing, trying to get even. Made it very clear. And it changed how I felt, because they said, Mike, are you forgiving that person? And all I need to do is ask myself, am I still doing anything that's in some way trying to get even with that person? And it's very clear, easy to answer, yes, no. Mike, have you forgiven yourself? Am I doing things, hurtful things, or not loving things that involve myself? It was very helpful. And I'm thinking more and more, this is really cool stuff. Step 9 is discipline. You know, this whole idea that the steps are in some part designed to teach me how to do a skill also helped make it clear to me that the steps were in order for a reason. For example, you know, if I'm going to make the amends, if I'm going to have the ability to have the discipline to make the amends, to go there and just suck it up and do what needs, look at what it takes. Certainly takes honesty to make amends. Takes faith, or hope. I hope this is going to work out, man. Takes faith. You know, my sponsors already asked me to do a lot of dumb things, and I've done them, and they've worked out. And so I trust my sponsor. That's a lot of faith. Making amends takes courage, no question about it. A lot of fear involved. I just need to do the next right thing. Takes integrity. To make amends, I need to speak the truth about myself into the ears of another person. Takes willingness. Takes humility. A clear recognition of what my part in was that matter, and make it right. Clearly it takes love. All those things put together give me the ability to have the kind of discipline it takes to make true amends. Not just saying I'm sorry, but to square the books and make amends. Step 10 was perseverance. And I'm thinking step 10 really doesn't have anything new in it. You know, continue to take personal inventory, and when we were along, promptly admitted it. We already kind of went through that, 4 and 5, and then we made our thing. And I said, where's the new thing? And what they said was, how good are you about continuing to do something that works for you? And I went, oops. Over the time, I had become very, very good at digging myself out of a hole. Very good at it. I mean, I'd go in there, the flames would be going, and I'd work, and I'd get things back, and I'd make the amends, and I'd get my stuff back, and I'd get my relationships back, and everything would be okay. And then there didn't seem to be any really reason to keep on working that hard, and so I would stop, and then all of a sudden, another hole, boom, and then I'd go. And so fall into a hole, dig myself out, fall into a hole, dig myself out. It never occurred to me that I might be able to do something to keep from falling in another hole. Perseverance. Keep doing what's working for you. And that was a new skill for me. And it does change how I feel. If I know that I'm actively engaged in recovery today, I feel one way. If I know that I have not done some of the things I really should have done to promote my own welfare, it makes me feel a different way. One way feels more comfortable than the other. And then we have awareness, step 11. Now, I already told you about the God thing. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him. Now, that's pure termite. Except for the ofs and the thes, that's pure termite. Every word in there. But they had asked me, well before I'd gotten to this point, they had asked me to start doing something. And they said it was a 3-part skill. And they just asked me to do this, start doing this. And what they said was, when you first get up in the morning, just ask, never mind who you're asking to, but ask in some way, shape, or form, help me find one neat thing. And I got to decide what neat was. You know, if the first thing I got was out of bed and I'm wandering toward the toilet and I look at myself in the mirror and it said, oh, that's pretty neat, then that counts, okay? The second part of the skill was to make it my business to look for the neat thing until I found it. And the third part of the skill was to, shortly before I fell asleep at night, remember what the one neat thing was and say thank you, never mind to who. So ask to be able to see the one neat thing, make it my business to find the one neat thing, and then I could forget all about it. And then, I remember what it was. 3 things. It sounds really simple. You got to try it. Trying to put those 3 things together on a daily basis was hard work for me. It took a lot of practice. But by the time I'd gotten to this 11th business, I was able, more days than not, putting things together on a fairly regular basis. And so we come to step 11, and I said, the principle I understand is awareness, but you know that I simply cannot do this God thing. And they said, well, that's not actually what it says. It says sought through prayer and meditation. I said, yeah, but it's all saying the same thing. And they said, well, what's prayer? And I said, it's getting on your knees, being a supplicant to God. And they said, no, that's not what it is. I said, prayer in its most basic form is simply an asking. Consider the Old English, prithee. I pray to thee. I ask you, which became please. All it is an asking. And I said, okay, I can deal with that. And then the meditation business. What is meditation? Well, It's a focusing of awareness. I think anybody in this room who's ever done anything about formal meditation knows that in most cases you start with breathing. You start focusing on your breathing. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in goes good, and out goes bad, and so on and so forth. But it almost always begins with breathing. And what you're doing is focusing on something that ordinarily you're not aware of. The breathing is a normal, automatic human function, and we're normally not aware of it. But if you go into starting meditation, you start becoming aware of something you're not ordinarily aware of. And same thing as you get, as you move on to other techniques, you start focusing on your third thumbnail, trying to, work your way along joints and body parts and that sort of thing. But so it's a focusing of awareness, trying to become aware of something that you're ordinarily not aware of. That's all meditation is. And they said, let's look at the one neat thing that you've been doing here for a while. First part, help me see one neat thing. Isn't that a prayer? Now, I was upset because they had tricked me. I mean, I was all ready to defend this one. Okay. Yes, I have been asking. I guess you could consider help me find one neat thing could be considered a prayer. And what about the second part of the one neat thing? Making it your business to look for the one neat thing. Well, that's sort of focusing, isn't it? Trying to become more aware of something that ordinarily I wouldn't be aware of. Trying to find something that ordinarily would pass me by. Isn't that a raising of awareness? Isn't that what meditation is? And I'm going, oh, all is lost now. They got me doing the prayer thing, they got me doing the meditation thing, and I didn't even know it. And what's the end result? I ask to see one neat thing, I make it my business to find one neat thing. And if there is such a thing as a God, then the highest form of that expression is the day that we exist in. And I am seeing something more in that than I would be ordinarily. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him. Awareness of things outside myself. And when I am aware of things outside of myself, it changes how I feel. If I'm entirely self-centered, I feel one way. If I'm somewhat aware of what other people's wants and needs might be, I feel a different way. One way feels more comfortable to me than the other. And then the service, of course, that's pretty self-explanatory in 12. And I looked around and I said, why didn't they tell me this before? And they had, of course. But I couldn't hear it because I wasn't a termite. But now I had the equivalent of a Rosetta Stone. You say faith, I have some idea of what you're talking about. You say prayer, I have some idea of what you're talking about. You say forgiveness, I have some idea of what you're talking about. You say hope, I have some idea of what you're talking about. And I have never ever once been successful in trying to stop drinking. And so I stopped trying to do that. And I started making it my business to try to do this other spiritual stuff. I started doing it on a real simple level. I modified the one neat thing just slightly. Every morning I have a little computer program that pops up a random number, 1 through 12. That number represents the principle that I need to look for that day. For example, if the number 1 comes up, I need to look for an opportunity to be honest in a situation where ordinarily I might not be. And I need to look for that situation until I find it. And then I need to make a decision as to whether I'm honest in that situation or not. Then I can forget about it and go back to my old lying ways. That's just fine. And I need to remember what that was before I go to bed at night. And I need to say thank you for having been given the situation. That's easy enough even for me to do. And I started doing that. I started making it my business to do that. I started making it my business to practice a spiritual principle at least one time, one day in my life. And I stopped trying to stop drinking. And what can I say? I've been sober ever since. Remember Dr. X? This is another official public action document that concerns Dr. X. Based upon the evidence presented by Dr. X, the Commission is of the opinion that the request for a full and unrestricted license to practice medicine in the state of Alabama shall be granted. I'm going to leave you now. I've taken up enough of your time. I'm going to leave you with the last 2 things that I say every night. The first thing is thank you. Thank you very, very much. And the second thing is good night all.